which by definition we all want. However, what I don't want is the drama, because, you know, Kyla's never been nice to me.
Is there a reason she has a problem with it?
She said she was upset because we started dating and they weren't quite finished. I said, except you were finished. You were finished.
She wasn't quite finished.
And it never once came back to, I heard you say this. I heard you did this. I've never done nothing to her. Well, she came here so we could have a meeting. And to be honest, most of it, she acted like she didn't even know she did nothing to me. She's like, well, what'd I do? Well, how did you remember that? Oh, y'all remember all kinds of old stuff. If you're gonna hold on to old stuff. And I said, it's not old. This was last month that you were talking about me.
When Kimmi Scott finally broke her silence, it didn't feel like reality TV anymore. It felt personal, it felt heavy, and most of all, it felt like a moment that had been building for far too long. For weeks, maybe even months, fans had been watching closely, picking up on small details that didn't quite sit right. The smiles looked forced, the conversations felt slightly off, and behind it all, there was this quiet tension that nobody could fully explain. Until now. Because when Kimmi spoke, she didn't hold back. She didn't scream, she didn't create a scene. Instead, she delivered her truth in a way that hit even harder, calm, steady, and painfully honest. And what she revealed left people questioning everything they thought they understood about her marriage, her journey, and the man who was supposed to stand beside her through it all.
Y'all talk about my things.
Okay.
Like my family, what's going on with my family, my grandkids.
And we will.
But when I asked, okay, but that's what I'm saying. I need you to be transparent too.
I am transparent.
When it comes talking about like y'all's life or like what's going on with you all.
At first, it seemed like another emotional chapter in a difficult story. But then, the deeper layers started to show, and what nobody expected was that this wouldn't just be about illness or recovery. This was about control, about image, about the uncomfortable possibility that something deeply personal had been turned into something performative. And once that idea entered the conversation, there was no going back. Kimmi Scott has always carried herself with a certain kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Long before her health battle became public, she was known as someone grounded, composed, and real. She wasn't the type to chase drama or create unnecessary conflict. If anything, she often seemed like the calm in the middle of everyone else's chaos. That's part of why her story hit people so hard when she revealed her diagnosis. It wasn't just the shock of the news, it was the way she shared it. There was no performance, no exaggerated emotion, just a woman sitting in her truth, facing one of the toughest challenges of her life. And in that moment, viewers didn't just see a reality star. They saw a human being navigating fear, uncertainty, and the weight of what was ahead. People connected with her instantly. Messages of support flooded in from everywhere. Women shared their own stories. Families spoke about loved ones who had gone through similar battles. For a moment, the noise of reality TV faded into the background, and something real took its place.
We're gonna do some more dinners, some more lunches.
Much as we talk, I feel like sometimes you two are not transparent.
But as time passed, that connection started to shift. At first, nobody questioned the cameras being there. It made sense. Sharing her journey could inspire others. It could raise awareness. It could even save lives. That's what many believed. But then something started to feel different. The way certain moments were shown, the way conversations were framed, the way emotions seemed to be packaged into neat, dramatic scenes. It wasn't obvious at first. In fact, you had to really pay attention to notice it. But once people saw it, they couldn't unsee it. And right in the middle of it all was Maurice. In the beginning, he appeared to be everything you'd expect from a supportive husband: present, attentive, calm. He was there during difficult conversations, sitting beside Kimmi as she opened up about her fears and her pain. But here's the twist. The more people watched, the more they started to question whether what they were seeing was genuine or something else entirely. there were moments where his responses didn't quite match the weight of what Kimmi was sharing, times when she was clearly struggling, trying to express something deeply emotional, and instead of meeting her in that space, he seemed distant, not physically but emotionally.
It was subtle, almost easy to miss, but viewers noticed. And once they started talking about it, those small observations turned into bigger conversations. Clips began circulating online. People slowed down scenes, replayed conversations, analyzed tone and body language. And the more they looked, the more uncomfortable the situation started to feel. Some said he seemed disconnected. Others went further, suggesting that his reactions felt rehearsed, like he was more focused on how he appeared than what Kimmi was actually going through. And that's when things really started to shift. Because when an audience begins to question authenticity, especially in a situation as serious as a health battle, it changes everything. What was once seen as a story of strength and support began to feel complicated, messy, unclear. Then came the moment that changed everything. Kimmi, who had remained composed through so much, finally addressed what had been building beneath the surface. And when she did, it wasn't explosive, it was precise. She spoke about how her journey had been handled, about the pressure of sharing something so personal while cameras were constantly present, about the emotional toll of not just fighting for her health, but doing it in a way that was being watched, edited, and presented to the world. But what hit people the hardest was when she spoke about Maurice, not in a way that was loud or accusatory, but in a way that made you lean in and really listen. She made it clear that there were moments when she didn't feel fully supported the way she needed to be, moments where it felt like the focus wasn't entirely on her well-being, but on something else. And that something else was never directly named, but people could feel it. Image, perception, the idea of being seen a certain way. And suddenly, all those earlier moments people had questioned started to make sense. What if those reactions weren't just awkward or off? What if they were calculated? What if instead of simply being present as a husband, Maurice was also thinking about how he would be perceived by the audience? That possibility hit fans hard, because it raises a deeper question, one that goes beyond just this situation. When your life is on display, when cameras are always around, how do you separate what's real from what's being shaped for viewers? And more importantly, what happens when those lines start to blur during something as serious as a health crisis?
Kimmi's words didn't just address her own experience. They opened the door to a much bigger conversation about reality TV, about authenticity, about the cost of turning personal pain into public content. And the emotional impact of it all was impossible to ignore. You could hear it in her voice, the exhaustion, not just from her physical battle, but from everything surrounding it. The feeling of being exposed, of having moments that should have been private turned into something consumable. But there was also strength, a quiet kind of power that comes from finally saying what you've been holding in. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She wasn't trying to create drama. She was reclaiming her story. And that's what made it so powerful. Because in a space where so much is controlled, edited, and shaped, she chose honesty, even if it made things uncomfortable, even if it changed how people saw her relationship, even if it meant pulling back the curtain on something that many would rather keep hidden. And the response from fans? Immediate, divided, but intense.
Some people defended Maurice, saying that no one knows how they would react in a situation like that maybe he was doing his best in a moment that's impossible to prepare for. But others weren't convinced. They pointed to the patterns, the moments that felt off, the way certain conversations played out. And they stood firmly on one side, believing that Kimmi had every right to speak up, to set boundaries, and to call out anything that didn't feel genuine. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't about TV. This was about her life, her health, her reality, and no one, no matter who they are, should have to question whether their pain is being handled with care or being turned into something else. As the dust began to settle, one thing became clear. This moment wasn't just a turning point in Kimmi's story. It was a turning point in how people view these kinds of shows altogether. Because when something this real enters a space built for entertainment, it forces everyone to rethink where the line should be and whether that line has already been crossed. Kimmi didn't just share her truth, she changed the conversation, and now everything feels different. Because once you see things from that perspective, it's hard to go back to watching it the same way again. And maybe that's the most powerful part of all. Not the drama, not the speculation, but the fact that one person chose to speak honestly about something that didn't feel right, and in doing so, made everyone stop and think about what we watch, about what we accept, and about the real people behind the stories we consume. Because behind every scene, every episode, every storyline, there's someone living it, and sometimes their truth doesn't fit neatly into a script.